The politics of personal destruction was a phrase popularized by the Clintons in the 90s to describe the attacks by what Hillary called the vast right-wing conspiracy. But is she actually more familiar with practicing that fine art than being its victim?
They have been the masters of the politics of personal destruction, and then they use the well-known trick of accusing your opponents of your own malfeasance. So they accuse conservatives of speaking honestly about the ethical shortcomings of the Clintons, while they in fact speak dishonestly about the integrity of their opponents. And that has been a bellwether, and it has done destruction to people who they've encountered.
Even people in the Democratic Party will acknowledge the Clintons are particularly ruthless and particularly aggressive when it comes to campaigns. The war room, this is a military metaphor for the campaign the Clintons invented, regarding instant responses, that no matter what the validity of a charge, you don't explain the charge, you don't apologize for the charge, you don't admit any error, you automatically attack the integrity or the motivations of the other side.
There are any number of things in the Clintons' political history that is worth recalling before you go in to vote for, potentially for a Clinton, in this case a Hillary Clinton. And it's a small example, but a telling one. When they turned on the travel office, where you had career civil servants doing a great job providing the travel service for the president and his staff, and they wanted to get a lackey friend in, they could have fired the guy in charge, but they accused him of a crime. They tried to ruin his life in order to be able to get him out and get their lackeys in.
When the Clintons moved to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in 1993, White House veteran Billy Dale was the director of the travel office. Dale had faithfully served 7 previous presidents, starting with John F. Kennedy in 1961. But Dale, who had actually voted for Clinton for president, would soon discover that business under the Clintons would not be business as usual.
We knew that we were in for a rougher transition because we had heard stories from Secret Service agents who had gone to Little Rock for a 2-week stay down there. And the stories that some of the agents would come back and tell us, that we just knew that it was going to be different. We didn't realize how different it was going to be. The new administration is free to fire anybody that they want to, but traditionally that does not happen.
On the day of Clinton's inauguration, Wednesday, January 20th, 1993, Billy Dale got a call from an unknown woman indicating that Catherine Cornelius, the 24-year-old third cousin of President Clinton, would soon be working in the travel office.
And I got to know who Catherine Cornelius was. She went to work in David Watkins' office, answering phones, but she never let up in her demands to take over the travel office. In the meantime, I get a telephone call from a gentleman in Ohio, and he wants to know how he can get in on some of the White House charter business. And I said, that's what I do. I arrange the charters. And he said, I know, but he says, we can make some money here. If I had made arrangements with that gentleman, I speculate that things would have been very different than as they turned out.
That call was from Darnell Martins, a partner of Clinton's close friends and Hollywood producers Harry and Linda Bloodworth Thomason in a travel agency called TRM. When Congress investigated, they learned Harry Thomason had multiple conversations with First Lady Hillary Clinton about taking over the White House charters.
At that time, I didn't even know who Harry Thomason was, but we have since learned that Catherine was reporting to him and he was reporting to the First Lady Hillary Clinton.
As Dale says, every new president has the right to hire new travel office staff, even though no president had done so for over 30 years. But not only was Billy Dale fired, along with 6 other travel office staff members, he was also locked out of his office. But that was only the beginning.
And I got accused of embezzling $14,000 that I couldn't account for because the logs were missing. At the same time, D.D. Myers is in the press room briefing the White House press corps, telling them that we were being fired for criminal misconduct and the FBI was being called in to conduct a criminal investigation.
I think that they wanted to make it look like they were doing it because there was corruption over there so nobody would criticize them, because the media liked Billy Dale and the people there.
Gary Aldrich was an FBI agent for 26 years, the last 5 as an agent responsible for background checks on White House staff.
Recall that the FBI had conducted investigations of all of these men and had determined that they were qualified to work in the White House and that they were honest individuals. I conducted some of those investigations. Billy Dale was humiliated and was accused of serious wrongdoing to the degree that they conduct a federal grand jury investigation and an indictment of him.
I had dedicated 32 years of my life to this job and served faithfully to Democrats and Republicans alike.
The experience was a major event in my career because it taught me that powerful politicians can misuse law enforcement authority almost whimsically. And because it was the First Lady ordering the investigation, well then charges have to be found. That scared me. That was different from my experience in the FBI of 26 years. I thought if we have reached the level where a politician can get irritated with somebody and cause them to maybe end up in federal prison, we've got a serious problem.
The White House Travel Office affair became known as Travelgate. When Dale's legal bills to defend himself were estimated to run as much as $750,000, he considered a plea deal, a fine of $69,000, and a brief jail sentence.
Blanche and I had been married for 38 years at that time. I decided that I would have to sell my home. Could I ask her to give up everything that we had worked for?
The plea bargain seemed just that, a bargain in order to save himself and his family from the unending ordeal. But when Dale was informed he would not be able to proclaim his innocence, he realized he couldn't bargain with the truth.
In the meantime, during this year, I got a notice from the IRS that I was being audited.
For the next 30 months, Dale was investigated. His son and daughter were also subpoenaed.
I remember Vicki, our oldest daughter, telling her mother that if I was found guilty, and maybe we better start over.
You were sent to jail for something you...
I remember during my trial, Vicki, my oldest daughter, telling her mother that if I was found guilty and had to go to jail for something that I did not do, that she didn't know if she could live in this country any longer, when the government would be responsible for doing something like that to her father.
When the case went to trial in the fall of 1995, a procession of White House journalists volunteered to serve as character witnesses for Dale, including Britt Hume and Sam Donaldson.
The press at the time, I think, ought to remind people that I testified at Billy Dale's trial as a character witness for him.
The jury needed less than 2 hours to reach a verdict.
And the jury came in and they found me not guilty on all counts. I laid my head down on the desk in front of me and cried.
Ultimately, the Office of the Independent Counsel's final report on the Travel Office firings found that Mrs. Clinton's sworn testimony was factually inaccurate.
Hillary Clinton was more powerful as a First Lady than any First Lady that had been in the White House that I knew of. Until I have learned that she was involved with it more than Bill was. Bill just wiped his hands of it and just would let her handle it.
That's an example of the cynicism and the ruthlessness of the Clintons. And at the time, I think a lot of people thought that Hillary had at least as much to do with that as Bill did.
What she did to the travel office, I mean, in a way, that is the most illustrative scandal because it was such an Evita Peron act of maliciousness toward these ordinary people. This guy running the travel office all these years, I'm getting them out, getting my rich Hollywood friends in. It's not even the most illegal thing they did, but it is the most contemptible thing they did.
Someone will stand on the steps of the Capitol and raise his or her hand to take the oath of office as the 44th President of the United States of America.
We must never underestimate this woman. We must never understate her chances of winning. We mustn't be lulled into a state of security and complacency by the newfound moderation that she likes to talk about. And we must never forget the fundamental danger that this woman poses to every value that we hold dear. You see, I know her.